Okay, here we go. Hi, I'm Michelle Malkin. This is our week-ending epic program for Michelle Malkin Live. We have been focusing on the issue of censorship, not just in the pandemic age, but increasing free speech squelching by Silicon Valley overlords. And I thought that there'd be no more appropriate person to end this week than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And he's fought many of these battles himself. And before I start interviewing him, I just want to talk a little bit and kind of set the table about why I have been so vocal about these issues in challenging Big Pharma, in questioning the vax establishment. For me, it's very personal. And I know for a lot of my followers and viewers out there, you will have similar stories. In 2004, when my youngest son was a 2-month-old, we looked at the huge and increasing mandatory vaccine schedule and simply asked very politely of our pediatrician whether we could delay the Hep B vaccine. We looked into it, as any responsible parents should do, and questioned whether it made sense for our newborn, who was going to be staying at home — I was a stay-at-home mom at the time — to be subjected so early on in his life, his developmental life, to a vaccine that was really intended to address things like IV drug use or sexually transmitted disease. And for simply asking these gentle and polite questions, we were booted from our pediatrician's office. And this set off a journey for me that led to questioning things like the HPV Gardasil mandate and questioning where the money interests lied in that. And of course, it's a bipartisan problem, both Democrats and Republicans. And Rick Perry in Texas, when he was governor, had rammed down an executive order down the throats of the families in Texas that would have mandated the Gardasil vaccine when there was no evidence of its safety or efficacy on school children as a condition for getting into school. That's the short sort of Cliff Notes version of why I've been highlighting these issues. And last year in March, I highlighted the fact that many of these global health organizations, which of course are dominating our lives now, had pinpointed something that they called vaccine hesitancy, and launched a campaign to stamp out this pesky development online to squelch dissent. So let me bring in Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Robert, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Michelle.
So I wrote about this issue of the censors cracking down on vaccine questioners, vaccine skeptics, whatever you want to call free-thinking people on this issue in March, but it actually happened much sooner. And I want you to give the followers and viewers out there a sense of the chronology of this. And you've got a fantastic article on your website about this.
Well, let me just comment about the hepatitis B vaccine, because that is, that's kind of a classic template for the entire vaccine program. There are now 72 mandated vaccines. When I was a kid, there were 3. And 72 vaccine doses, let me put it that way. And the hepatitis B vaccine came along, I think, in 1981. And that was a vaccine, as you said, that Merck developed in order to treat the groups, the specific demographic groups who were experiencing high rates of hepatitis B, which were promiscuous male homosexuals, IV drug users who were sharing needles, and then sex workers and prostitutes. And as it turns out, and CDC recommended it for those groups, as it turns out, none of those groups were interested in buying the vaccine. And so Merck was losing a tremendous amount of money. It went to CDC and said, we want to mandate, you need to help us out of this jam. CDC said, no problem, we'll mandate it for kids. And they put it on the childhood schedule with no justification. Children today, and at that time, had zero chance, zero risk of being injured by hepatitis B. If you were not in one specific category, and that was if you were born to a mother who had hepatitis C, then you also could, or hepatitis B, you also get a hepatitis B from your mother. But every mother who goes into a hospital, any hospital in this country, immediately is tested for hepatitis B prior to giving birth. So those children probably could profit from the vaccine, but they're identified. But if you were not in that identified subset, you had zero risk. And they began by giving it to babies on the day of birth. The hepatitis B vaccine at that time contained huge levels of mercury. Mercury was removed in 2003 and replaced with aluminum, which is another neurotoxin. The babies, the hepatitis B, when given to the baby, only lasts for 2 years.
That's right.
So they had to come back and give it another vaccine. I think altogether 5 vaccines.
Right.
And there's no chance that that baby between the day of birth and 2 years old was going to have sex with a prostitute or share needles with IV drug users or engage in promiscuous sex. So there was no risk, zero risk to that baby. And yet we mandated them so that Merck can make a profit on its vaccine. And that is the only reason those babies get that vaccine. And the adjuvant that is used in that vaccine is probably the most dangerous adjuvant currently used in medicine, that aluminum adjuvant. And that is the same aluminum adjuvant that is now in the Gardasil vaccine, which is also made by Merck. That's causing all of these horrendous epidemic of autoimmune disease among the girls and boys who get that vaccine.
Yes, and just for the lay audience and people who are uninitiated, could you explain sort of in kind of 101 terms what an adjuvant is?
Well, what happened, the first vaccines that were made were live virus vaccines. They literally took cowpox, or they took a weaker strain of smallpox, and they would inject it to people, and they would give you the disease, but a mild form of it, and theoretically, it would give you lifetime protection against wild viruses. But what they found was that when you were injected with that live virus vaccine, that you could pass the virus on to other people, so you could infect your whole community. And oftentimes it mutated when the virus would come out of you in your feces or in sweat or whatever, and it would get into public waterways or find other vectors for getting into other human beings. For example, today, 70% of the polio cases on Earth are vaccine strain polio. They're polio strains that are coming from Bill Gates's vaccine. So he promised to eradicate polio. Actually, he's causing some of the worst epidemics that we've seen in decades. So, and that's because he used a live virus vaccine, which is the cheapest. So early on, the regulators expressed a preference for dead virus vaccine. A dead virus vaccine means you chop the virus up and use a particle of it, or you use a version of the virus that's been killed, and it can still provoke some antibody response in your body and teach your body to create antibodies the next time it sees that vaccine, to the real virus. But it's a very weak response, and it's not durable. So it goes away quickly, and you have to continually vaccinate people, and eventually that stops working. And so what vaccinologists learned, again, very early on, is that if they added something that was horrendously toxic to the vaccine, your body would associate, your immune system would develop a memory that associated that shock to your system, that your whole body knew was toxic, was poisoning you, with that antigen, with the viral particle. The next time it saw that viral particle, it would mount an allergic response to it. And so there was a search by virologists, immunologists, vaccinologists all over the world to find the most toxic substances known to man. They found mercury, which literally is the most neurotoxic element in the universe that is not radioactive. And they began adding those things to vaccines because all they were interested in was provoking an immune response, because that is the metric that the FDA uses to license a vaccine. So when you get a vaccine license, they never do what you would think they do, which is to give the vaccine to 1,000 people and not give a fake vaccine to 1,000 people. Send them both out into the communities and wait for an epidemic to hit or a contagion to hit, and then see what the results are, whether the unvaccinated people get fewer diseases than the vaccinated people. That never happens, and it has never happened. A vaccine has never been tested that way. The way that vaccines are tested is the company gives the vaccine to 1,000 people, and then it measures their blood to see if they got a serological response. In other words, if they're producing antibodies, and then they do it in a year to see, they challenge you in a year to see again if you're producing the antibodies. And if it's sufficiently robust at the outset and then durable a year later or 2 years later, then you get the license. And so the vaccinologists were always at war with toxicologists. The toxicologists would come in and say, yeah, you got the license, but what happened to the mercury? Where did it go? What was its fate in your body? And the vaccinologist said, we don't want to hear it. We don't want to look at it. We don't want to know anything about it. And they never did any tests on mercury. They literally never did a single safety test. They didn't test what happened to the aluminum. And we now know that, of course, it doesn't leave your body. It's not excreted. It goes into your organs. It goes into your brain. It lodges there. The mercury turns into a very immediately metabolizes into a very toxic, the most toxic form of mercury, which is organic mercury. The aluminum locks in your brain, and it may be there 20 or 30 years later. And it causes inflammation everywhere where one of those molecules sits. And eventually people get Alzheimer's, and also when it hits your other organs, you're going to get these autoimmune diseases, because it's designed to provoke an outsized response by your immune system. Vaccines, they say, well, vaccines only have a little toxic. Well, guess what? It's enough toxic, they say, to permanently alter your immune system for your whole life. So it's got a lot of toxins, and they don't know, they can tell you nothing about what happens to it. And, you said, Michelle, you were talking about, what it takes to be a mother these days, because our children are swimming around in a toxic soup and there's stuff on every side. And if you're a good mother, you ask a lot of questions. You ask about your baby stroller. You ask about your car seat and make sure it's the best one. And you ask about, about the pesticides in the baby food and whether they're organic or not, and what kind of container, whether it's plastic or glass. You're thinking about that all the time. But you're going into a doctor's office and he's injecting your baby with the most hideously toxic substances, plus a lot of weird stuff like insect parts, Cocker Spaniel DNA, pangolin DNA, feral monkey kidneys, and a lot of vaccines contain fetal tissue.
Right.
And most of the fetal tissue is taken from a specific fetus, which is a baby that was aborted in 1966, forcibly aborted from a mother who was committed to a mental institution. And then that material was made tumorigenic. It was made carcinogenic. Those human cells were made carcinogenic in order to make them immortal, so they can continue to use them and to grow vaccine cultures on them. And when that vaccine gets into your body, it's loaded with that child's DNA. And they fragmented the DNA very early on because they thought that would keep the whole chains of DNA from going in and actually colonizing your body and changing your DNA. It turns out that was the worst thing they could have done. We now know those fragments do get into your cells and they can alter your DNA, but they're also tumorigenic, they're carcinogenic, and that whole generation that has received those baby cells is now experiencing an epidemic of soft tissue cancers, of breast cancers, of colon cancers, of prostate cancers, which are specifically the cancers we know that those tumor cells are designed to attack. So, and mothers go in and they just trust their physician. But if you ask the physician what's in this vaccine, like you did,
yes,
they're never going to tell you there's fetal tissue and there's insect DNA. They're going to say, I don't know, but they're safe. How do you know they're safe? Well, I took it during, and the funny thing was that during that recorded session, that secret session of the World Health Organization with all the vaccine people from the World Health Organization last month, you had Heidi Larkin and all these people who have been telling us, and Dr. Swaminathan, and all the officials who've been saying for years, we have to attack vaccine hesitancy, and vaccines are safe and they're totally tested. There's great surveillance systems. They all got together with each other and they said, holy cow, we don't have any safety systems. Our surveillance systems are completely dysfunctional. We can't keep lying to people. We actually need to do some science. We can't keep telling the same stories. And, so anyway, that session, they acknowledge that they don't know what they're doing. And one of the things that Heidi Larkin said during that session was, she said, doctors don't know what they're doing. She said, at medical school, at most, you're given a half a day instruction on vaccines. And basically, we know what that is. The professor comes in and says, vaccines are good. They don't harm anybody. Here's how many you have to do. Alternate arms, do them on this schedule, and they prevent disease. And that's it. And so that's what they believe. And, as it turns out, we now know a lot more about vaccines than most doctors do.
Yeah. And that
science.
Yeah. And that's what's threatening, right? Because how dare, especially, just speaking of moms, so many of the legions of dissidents and whistleblowers and advocates out there who are challenging the so-called conventional wisdom just happen to be moms who've done their job and who haven't outsourced it to anybody else, who are not just going to blindly trust power, and then as a reward for being a good parent are labeled sociopaths by public health experts. And of course, you and I are very familiar with the tarring of that label, so-called conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, and they're gaslighted, they're bullied, they're told, you don't know what you're talking about, you're getting your information from the internet, which is true. They're getting it from the internet, they're getting it from PubMed, which is on the internet, which is the archive of all the peer-reviewed scientific studies in the world, and that's where they're going, and they're actually reading science. And that's why it's so important to them to say that, to tell again that, it's a religion. This is an orthodoxy. It's nothing to do with science. And the genesis story of the vaccine religion is that Andy Wakefield, this fraudulent, surgeon from England, has lied and committed fraud. This is all lies. That he now has mesmerized all of these women, and who were charmed by him, and he's kind of this British Svengali that is like the Pied Piper who's leading them off a cliff of error. And so his story has to be repeated every time, because this orthodoxy, like all orthodoxy, is misogynistic. It starts off with an idea that we have to follow strong leaders. That we don't study science ourselves. We take the word of authority about what the science says, and that women have to be subjugated and they have to be silenced. And it starts off, and this is so weird for Democrats during the Me Too era, who are saying we got to start listening to women. We got to stand up to the bullies, and yet they're leading the path. My party is leading the path to say we've got to somehow silence the 1 million women in this country, 1.5 million women, who say, I saw a vaccine injure my kid.
Right.
I know what happened to my child. And my child was completely healthy until he got that vaccine. And then they tell their stories, and you've heard their stories, and I've heard thousands and thousands of them. They all say the same thing. Those women have to be silenced. There's a study that came out recently. There's 3.5 million kids in this country who have been diagnosed with autism. There's a study that came out recently that 70% of the women, of the mothers of those children, believe their child was injured by a vaccine. Well, that is 2 million women. And this orthodoxy begins with having to silence them, to shut them up, to censor them. And by the way, there are a lot of doctors who know a lot about vaccines. And those doctors are the ones they're punishing, because those are the doctors who didn't learn it in medical school. They saw injuries in their practice. There are doctors like Ken Stoller and all these other, all of these other really wonderful, heroic, Dr. Bob Sears, Ed Zaraf, all these incredible child-loving doctors who saw a child injured and said, and listened to what the mother said, which is what pediatricians are supposed to do. Listen to the parents. That's what the AAP Red Book says.
Yep.
Listen to the parents first, because they know. They listened. And the parents, after parent after parent, told them it was the vaccine. And these doctors started doing research and trying to figure out how to recover these kids. And there's a lot of science out there on that. And they began doing it and reading it and studying it and getting really good at it. And they're the ones who will write vaccine exemptions for school. Because they know. A regular doctor will say, no, vaccines don't injure you. That's what I learned in medical school. Oh, I will not write you an exemption. Oh, everybody goes to the specialists, and the specialists are these doctors who actually have studied it and know what they're talking about. And so, yes, hundreds of people go to those doctors. And that's why Richard Pan can get up and say, there's only 72 doctors in the state that have written 90% of the exemptions. Yeah, that's true. It's not true because they're making money on it. None of them are.
Yes. And just to fill people in real quick, just to jump in. So Richard Pan is essentially a big pharma shill in California. He's helped lead the charge among the big pharma water carriers in the state legislature to try and eliminate vaccine exemptions and foist an even more draconian vaccine schedule on kids.
Yeah, exactly. And what he's done now is he's bringing charges against, I think, 75 physicians in the state. He's gotten the state medical board to bring charges, which he actually orchestrated his buddies to file the charges. Those charges were not filed by patients. They were filed by pharmaceutical shills to try to ruin the 70 doctors who are writing the exemptions in the state. And if they lose their license, all of their exemptions are null and void. And so, these are children in California whose doctor has told them, you cannot get a vaccine because it may kill you.
Right.
And the state of California, this is the same thing's happening in New York, is coming in and saying, we're going to give it to them anyway.
Yeah. So I want to talk about the political landscape a bit, because you talked about how members of your party disrespect so many of these millions of mothers and families out there who can testify about the dire health impact that this huge explosion of vaccines have had on them, the synergistic effects, the unknown long-term effects, inflammation, allergies. We're sold this bill of goods that after 30 years of all of these jabs and injections, that we were going to have the healthiest generation of kids in America. Can anybody say that the kids now are healthier than the kids 30 years ago when, you and I were only getting a handful of shots? So, where do moms and dads go to vote for elected officials who are going to resist big pharma? I mean, the only person I can think of, at least on the national landscape, who's even dared to dip their toe into this is Rand Paul, a Republican.
Rand Paul has, although he's still on the fence, the one guy who's been very good on this is Bill Posey, who's a congressman from Florida. Mm-hmm. But he's been made a pariah because of it. And that, the Republican Party is better in the state legislature. There's a lot of really heroic Republicans on the state legislature. Once they get into Congress, they're the same as the Democrats. They're all taking money from Pharma. In fact, Darrell Issa told me, Darrell Issa tried to do hearings on the vaccine court. Mm-hmm. And then Chaffetz tried to do the same thing, and Trey Gowdy. Mm-hmm. And Darrell Issa told me, I said to him, why you said you schedule these hearings, then you cancel them at the last minute. And he said, the day I scheduled the hearing, I got a phone call from the Speaker of the House and from the Majority Leader. And they both said to me, if you go forward with these hearings, you will lose your chairmanship. We will take it away from you. The Republicans have the same party discipline as the Democrats when you get to the top. And of course, President Trump has said that he's going to do good things on vaccines, but the actual, the record is not good.
No, it's not good. And I had heard that he was going to offer some promise and hope to those of us who want to end this madness. And then here he is last week advocating for Operation Warp Speed.
But it's not even that, because the COVID crisis, you can say, you can excuse politicians because they're all in a dither, and but his appointments have been very bad. They've been, Azar, they're pharmaceutical lobbyists, pharmaceutical insiders, and Gottlieb, who came right out of Pfizer. He was handpicked by Pfizer. Pfizer gave $1 million to the president when he announced the Vaccine Safety Commission, and the president then appointed Scott Gottlieb is the head of FDA, and Gottlieb, as soon as he got in, killed the Vaccine Safety Commission. And then the president brought in Alex Azar, who's another pharmaceutical lobbyist, the president of Eli Lilly, and and the entire agency shut down to any thought of doing any kind of reform on vaccines. So we're not. The point is that although the Democrats have been much worse on the state level and the Republicans have been much better, we're not getting anything from either party on the federal level. And we need to figure out ways to reclaim our political system, and we need to do it from the ground up, because we're not going to do it from the top up. We have access in the courts. We've figured out some ways that we can actually go to court on these issues. But the real power is going to come both from the courts, and it's going to come from the grassroots, and it has to be a coordinated attack. And that's what we're trying to do at Children's Health Defense, to help people organize nationally, to weaponize information from them, to get them really, really good science, hard science, to make it accessible, to help them articulate it, to allow them to have things that they know they can say safely. Science is going to support them, that they can bring to their state legislature, that they can write to their local newspaper, their letters to the editor, and then, to help them get organized. And we're working in 50 states, we're working with local groups who are doing the organization in that state. And what we've really, I think, succeeded in doing is we're building institutions. And that is the only way that broad-scale social movements succeed. You have
And yeah,
institutions that can stand up to and challenge the big institutions that have been erected by the status quo, by the vested interests,
yeah.
to defend their orthodoxies, to defend their power. You can't just do it haphazardly. You need to have a concerted, planned, strategic attack, and you need to organize.
So, at least over the last 10 years, and I've been sort of a denizen of social media and the internet for almost 20, social media and the internet had held out this promise of being a great equalizer, right? A disruptor. It was very egalitarian. And that was the difference between emergent movements succeeding and failing, was our ability to communicate with each other, but then also get our message across without having to pay, for advertisements, like on corporate media, which is, of course, bought and sold and paid for by big pharma. But to tie this back into this whole censorship issue, it just seems like the screws have been turned even tighter, and that many of these forces that were already against us before this pandemic erupted, however it erupted, are leveraging this and exploiting an opportunity to shut it. I mean, every day YouTube videos are being yanked down, and I believe one or two of yours have been as well.
Everything that we do is censored. It's either it's throttled. It's even just our day-to-day operations are all throttled. We're not allowed to boost. We haven't been allowed to boost on Instagram or Facebook for years. We're not allowed to do advertising, and that's been true for years. And but beginning in last year, in 2019, the World Health Organization, which is owned by Bill Gates, declared vaccine hesitancy the greatest threat to the planet, and all of those big data, big telecom groups, Silicon Valley groups began systematically shutting us down and openly censoring us. I was shocked that Adam Schiff, who was a Democratic leader, the highest leaders in the party, literally wrote a letter to Facebook, to Google, to Pinterest, to all the other big platforms, and said, you need to start censoring what they called vaccine misinformation. And that's just a euphemism for any statement that disagrees or doesn't comply with the pharmaceutical pronouncements by pharmaceutical companies or regulatory officials who are captured by those companies. It has nothing to do whether it's true or not. And in fact, the vaccine industry and the pharmaceutical industry and the regulators are warning constantly about vaccines on their, on the air, and that they're never called down for it. I'll just give you an example that CDC's claim that the flu shot works. The Cochrane collaboration and the British Medical Journal have looked at all the literature and said that's just not true.
Right. And
yet they're constantly saying it. They talk about 40,000 flu deaths a year. And this is what they keep saying. Oh, there's 80,000 last year. It's going to be a terrible flu season. A lot of people are going to die again. We're having record numbers of deaths. In fact, the number of flu deaths last year were about 2,200.
Right.
And not 80,000. They tie in pneumonia deaths. CDC gives them the pneumonia deaths numbers, and they never check them. And in order to scare people, that's vaccine misinformation. Right. And yet they're never called on it.
Right.
And we're constantly, we're not allowed, no matter how true what we write is, no matter how well sourced, it's removed. And it's really extraordinary to me that, that there's not, and by the way, Michelle, it's not just vaccines now that they're throttling and censoring. It's anything that challenges the pharmaceutical paradigm. So they're going after, wellness doctors like, Dr. Gary Null and Deepak Chopra. They are going after any functional medicine, any homeopathy, chiropractors,
yes,
vitamins, nutrition, anything that cannot be patented.
Right.
the pharmaceutical industry does not control, they're going after. And one thing people need to know is that Google is a vaccine company. Google's parent company, Alphabet and Verily, have a series of sister subsidiaries of Google's that actually manufacture vaccines, flu vaccines, and other vaccines, and they're partnering with all the pharmaceutical companies. So Google has a $761 million partnership with Glaxo, and what they're doing is they're harvesting medical information. That's a huge part of their business, and then they're selling it to the pharmaceutical companies. They're partnering with the pharmaceutical companies so that they can use that medical. They can tell what your buying habits are. They can hear you cough listening to Siri, and that all of these, the surveillance systems they're erecting and the informational systems and how we use them and what we purchase is all turned into sellable data, is now going to the vaccine companies and the big pharmaceutical companies, and they're partnered with them. And so, they're really just big part of the industry.
Yeah, you got to follow the money to find the truth. And just as a side note, of course, Bill Gates had maxed out on donations to Adam Schiff, who's the head of the House Intelligence Committee. And it was just bewildering to me, until you look up those donations, why all of a sudden is he such a crusader on that issue? Well, you just connect the dots. The other thing I wanted to mention to people too is you mentioned the Cochrane collaboration. And for parents who are really just getting into this entire issue, it can be so confusing to figure out who do you trust, who don't you trust. And Cochrane is one of the most respected scientific outfits out there. I think they got bought out, and there's another. The founders have a new organization of their own. But the point is, they're sort of a neutral, trustworthy arbiter on the quality of these peer-reviewed studies. And it's doing that homework that can be so difficult when you are plugged into social media and they're telling you who's authoritative. They're telling you, they're directing you, if I type in your name, Robert, and vaccines, automatically it pops up all the government sources, right? That's where they're steering us. And that's so difficult when you're waging this battle, and they've rigged the playing field.
Yeah, and it's right out of Orwell or, Kafka or Aldous Huxley, Brave New World. It's, the idea that people of either Republican or Democratic Party would agree to censorship in the United States of America on any issue is, it's almost, beyond comprehension for somebody in my generation. I mean, we fought World War II because we were the democracy. We're the inventor of the First Amendment. We're the home of the free press. Nobody censors anything. Even the Nazis are allowed to march and to speak their mind in the United States of America. And we have faith in the democracy of the market, the free market of ideas, that we can argue about things openly, civilly, and that if people lie, that's going to happen. They're going to get caught in the market of ideas. And now these Silicon Valley people who, as you pointed out, we thought they were going to democratize us, and they really are just ushering us into the worst form of tyranny that I think anybody has ever comprehended.
Yeah. Yeah. Have a couple minutes left with you. So I want to ask you about a couple of things. I think I read somewhere that a debate is being set up between you and Alan Dershowitz.
We're working on that. Alan has said, I've talked to Alan, and he said that he would be happy to debate me, and we're trying to figure out a platform. Wow.
Gotcha. And lastly, and this is a good segue because I'm going to be having a panel on after you, you wrote such an eloquent, beautiful, and informative introduction to Plague of Corruption. And one of the things that the introduction did that I thought was so effective was put it in the context of so many scientific dissidents throughout the ages, not just over the last 10 or 20 years, but centuries, whose lives have been threatened or ended because they dared to challenge the establishment. I wondered if you could speak to that a little bit and kind of give that sort of broad background and landscape so that people understand where we're really set in this entire battle.
There's a name for the phenomena, and it's called the Semmelweis effect. And it was taken from a doctor whose name was Ignaz Semmelweis, who was practicing. He was a Hungarian doctor who was practicing in Europe at a time when 50% of the women who came into hospitals to give birth to their children were dying of something they then called birthbed or fever. We call it now puerperal fever. And this was 40 years before Pasteur. Didn't know about germs. And he had this idea that the same doctors were performing the autopsies down in the morgue on the people who died, and then they were coming up and doing live births and delivering babies. And he thought, he had an idea that they were carrying particles that were somehow deadly and bringing them into the delivery room. And that was what was causing the birthbed fever. And he did this experiment with hygiene where he had them all wash their hands, and the birthbed fever death rates dropped to 2%. And he published on it. And initially, those publications were welcomed and applauded. But then the medical community said, wait a minute. What he's saying is that we were killing babies for generations when we were promising to take care of them. They went after him and they discredited him. They took his license away. They locked him in a mental institution. And he died a week later, mysteriously. And there are many. Is that your phone or mine?
I think it's mine.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Anyway, there are many other examples of that throughout history. Rachel Carson, when she tried to, ban DDT, she was attacked by the American Medical Association because they had been using DDT as a pesticide to get rid of mosquitoes and reduce malaria, but they hadn't thought through the potential toxic effects. So they went after Carson and said she was they tried to destroy her. The same is true on leaded gasoline. And, I gave many examples throughout history. Alice Stewart, who was a British scientist, a leading British scientist of her time, she won the highest awards in science from Britain. And she was she was seeing a lot of children, particularly children of wealthy and middle-class families. This was during the 1950s and 60s, who were getting certain kinds of leukemia very early in life, and it wasn't happening to the poor. And she realized after a lot of observation and science that the thing that they had in common was the common practice at that time of X-raying pregnant women to look at the fetus. And it only happened to women who were going to, who had the wealth to go to middle-class doctors who had that X-ray machine. And she said, it's the X-ray that's killing these kids. And for 20 years, the medical community fought her. I don't think she ever published another paper. Her career was destroyed. And then a few years after that, it became a consensus. And yeah, of course, this is where the leukemia is coming from, and the practice was stopped. But on every major innovation, in medicine that has challenged existing paradigms, the original people who started talking about it were absolutely eviscerated in a way that just does not happen in other professions. Really just destroyed. I think a lot, and that's what happened to Andrew Wakefield, and it's happening right now. I mean, we now call it getting Wakefielded.
It's actually a verb.
Yeah, his name is a verb.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's an incredible risk and sacrifice to tell the truth and threaten the powers that be. And you've been doing it a long time, and I've never had a chance to thank you in person. You've opened my eyes. And one of the things that's magical, of course, is that we're on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, and yet often that arc does bend. And I think that, I don't know you well, but it's just in the work that you do and in the writing that you do and everything that you commit yourself to every single day, I feel that the same core values that we share, that we know that are at stake every single day, and certainly have been illuminated even more during this pandemic, and that is our children. And, my future grandchildren and the grandchildren that you have. That's why we do what we do, not because we're grifters, not because we are trying to trick people, not because we're on some sort of power trip. It's so strange, like the Alice in Wonderland world that we face, because we're accused of the very things that many of the people that attack us every day are actually projecting on the forces of good. So God bless you, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Thank you for joining us.
Please visit my Instagram site. I publish there every day.
Okay, what is it, so I can put it up on a banner right now?
It's Robert F. Kennedy Jr. At Robert F. Kennedy Jr. That's it.
On Instagram. Yes, and you do live videos there, which haven't gotten banned yet, right?
Yeah, well, we only did the one with Polly last week, but we're going to do them every week.
Yes, and the latest one you did is an interesting one on Moderna and their vaccine trials, correct?
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right. That was a really, really helpful, useful, informative, and enlightening video interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I'll have the archived version up on YouTube, and of course you can continue to share it on the Twitter post right here for Periscope. And I am getting ready to line up our power panel for this Friday. And I hope I'm able to pronounce everybody's names correctly. Let me bring this in sort of Brady Bunch style. This is Kent Heckin' Lively. Hey, Kent.
Hey, Michelle. How you doing?
Perfect. You sound great. I'm going to bring in Charlene Bollinger. Did I pronounce that correctly, Charlene?
You sure did. It's so good to be here. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you for joining me. This is so exciting. And of course, a return appearance by Judy Mikovits. Hi, Judy.
Hi, Michelle.
Great.
Hi,
I'm
Hey,
so
Judy.
great.
Good
Yeah,
to see you, Judy.
Everybody can go ahead and exchange, across this way. So let me just do quick intros, and then I'm going to go from Charlene to Kent and then Judy, and then we can just have a free-for-all here. Charlene Bollinger is, how do I put this? You are just an internet activist and leader. You've got a video show that you do, and you've been interviewing some incredible guests that I want you to talk about. And you have faced many of the censorship issues that I'm highlighting this week. Kent Heckin' Lively is a dad. You're out in California. You were the co-author of 2 books, Plague as well as Plague of Corruption.
Yes.
Yes, there it is.
There.
The #1 New York Times bestseller, is that right? Or Amazon bestseller, as well as bestseller on a number of national lists. And Judy Mikovits, you don't need any introduction at all.
I don't know if that's good or bad. Michelle.
And we have a lot to catch up on, and the unceasing attacks have only mounted, of course, since we spoke. And you're just you're like Wonder Woman with those bracelets. I'm dating myself because in the 70s, bing, 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 right? So Charlene, can you tell my audience a little bit more about the work you do? And then also, we've been in touch about some of the throttling that you've experienced, especially over the last couple of weeks.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity, Michelle. There has been so much going on in the background. Ty, my husband, and I are filmmakers, authors, and we've been doing this for quite some time. It started back in 1995, 96 for us. A lot of research. We self-published books that went to the top of the charts in 2006. And then in 2014, we started making our films. We've reached 50 million people with our films, The Truth About Cancer and The Truth About Vaccines. We just live to save lives because we lost family members due to a lack of knowledge. And we now offer that up to the world on a silver platter, free. And no good deed goes unpunished. We are heavily censored. Twitter kicked us completely off all of our accounts. And thankfully, we have a large following. And so they gave Jack the business, and we're back. And we've been censored on a lot of our platforms, but we've worked with Judy and others. And it's our goal just to reach the world with truth.
That's fantastic. So talk about that. When was it exactly that you got suspended from Twitter?
Yeah, that was approximately 2 to 3 weeks ago. They, without warning or reason, no offending tweet, they removed all 3 of our accounts, and we petitioned them to tell us why and to reinstate us. We heard nothing in return. So I was doing a live video with John Mappin in Camelot. And in that live video, Michelle, I mentioned a new handle that we had that we just weren't using. And within 2 minutes of that live video, they literally took us down. The followers were saying, oh, you're down now. So they were watching us live. So that was the 4th hit we got. And every day I've been going live on our Facebook and Instagram, updating our followers. And they literally flooded Twitter. And without any reason, we were back. Now, we are being heavily shadow banned on especially Truth About Big C. That was our biggest, hottest page, and we're being shadow banned. So we are working mostly under a Cancer Truth News on Twitter.
Gotcha. That's right. And that's the one that I tagged so that people can follow you there. And I'll make sure that I put banners up for everyone so they know where to follow you. Kent, the last time we communicated, you had just had an interesting phone call, I believe, with a CBS producer, or was it a CNN producer?
It was a CNN producer.
Yeah. Tell the viewers about that.
So what happened was I got a phone call from a producer for CNN. She was actually a producer for Chris Cuomo, and she wanted to find Judy. So I called her back, but knowing what the media is likely to do, I made sure that I recorded the interview on my camera as I called her back. And very quickly I said, do you mind if I make a record of this phone call? And of course she said yes. And so she says, I really want to find Dr. Judy. Can you get me in touch with her? And I said, well, I have some concerns because of the great amount of money CNN gets from pharmaceutical companies. We wonder about your ability to be independent on this issue. Well, she said, oh, I really don't know much about that. If you don't think you can help me, that's fine. But I'd really like to get in touch with Dr. Judy. And I said, well, let's back up for a minute. Let's go at it this way. How about you tell me what percentage of the evening news at CNN is sponsored by the pharma companies? And she goes, well, I don't know. I can't speak to that. I'm not at liberty to say. She gave me like 4 different denials. And I said, do you not know, or are you not at liberty to say? Because those are 2 different things.
Yeah.
And she hung up on me. So within 3 questions, I got hung up on. So I don't think CNN is going to be calling me back.
Yeah, that's for sure. Well, anytime you start treading into the dangerous territory of pointing to the financial bottom line for corporate media to stifle the truth about cancer, vaccines, the public health, industrial complex, you're not going to get very far. That's part of the frustration, because if you don't have the 4th estate and the people who call themselves watchdogs and guardians of the public interest advocating for you, and increasingly it's sort of like a funnel, right? When I started out in social media, it was this wide, right? Anybody could say anything. You didn't have to worry as long as you were expressing a peaceful opinion. But that has narrowed and narrowed and narrowed. And so, I mean, you could have a very pessimistic view about it, but then you look at what's happened with your book, Kent and Judy, and you look at the fact that no matter what these overlords try to do, they have not been able to squelch the truth. So, Judy, I want to go to you. Did you see this? Because I just pulled it up. I guess it was from yesterday, the day before. The New York Times has not relented. There's this new piece. It's called How the Plandemic Movie and Its Falsehoods Spread Widely Online. So they must have some, dweeb who gets paid a lot of money to come up with scary charts. And it's a chart of various viral videos and how they've spread. And Plandemic is this, it's just like this, whoosh, right? And there's an episode of The Office that's kind of flatlining like this. I'm sure these people who call all of us conspiracy theorists are thinking, well, how did you rig that? Who did you pay off to make that happen? How did you do that, Judy?
Well, I had nothing to do with it, really. We call it Wacka Judy, like the game at Chuck E. Cheese,
Right,
Whack-A-Mole. So, and we just keep talking and we keep giving it to people independently. We just keep telling the truth, and they can't come up with any answers which are not the truth. Mickey Willis, who made the film, he allowed it to be downloaded to everybody's computer so that everybody could keep sharing it. And that's exactly what everybody did, which was continue to share it. And I worked with, and I was on Ernie Hancock, Freedom's Phoenix, this morning, and he downloaded, made a bunch, made CDs, what Ernie does best. And we just keep getting the information out and getting it out there to anybody who wants it for free. No, we didn't pay anybody. It's just a network of honest, truthful, godly people who just will not let this die.
So that's a key. When I was talking with Robert in the previous segment, we talked about, well, how do you rectify the power imbalance between all of these moneyed forces and the grassroots? And social media had been that great equalizer, but absent, being able to post on YouTube without having to worry, having a decentralized distribution, like of your video, right? It's almost like,
right.
in communist history, right? The Soviet underground was called the Samizdat, and they literally would just like Xerox anti-communist talking points and have to resort to, Stone Age technology to get their message across, but they did. So this is very much like the Samizdat. And then now, and let me go to Charlene, with all of this legislation coming down the pike, largely sponsored by the forces of darkness and evil and coercion, I can say that. We have things like this House bill. Okay, you can't even make this up. 6666. Have you and your followers and members been tracking this?
Yes, this is quite erroneous. So, Michelle, what I'm doing right now is I'm trying to get all of the censorship issues and interviews I'm doing all in one place with the calls to action, the petitions, information about what these bills are. And we covered this in our film in episode, I think, 9 of The Truth About Vaccines, which is still up online. And it's problematic. It's very concerning. We heard it come out of the World Health Organization first, where they announced that if you're sick, you have a cough, we are just going to come into your house and we're going to remove you in a dignified manner, which we were outraged by that. And so we put it into the film. We talked about it. But then shortly thereafter, we see this rolled out in HR 6666, the extra 6 just for good measure, I guess. I mean,
Right.
that number, what are they doing with the number? They don't even hide their agenda with the number in our face like that. But I've seen clips of people talking, government officials saying that we are going to just track and trace, and we're going to go into your house and take your temperature. And if you have a temperature or if you have a cough, we're just going to remove you. And I am a mother of 4 children. You just aren't going to touch my children when they're sick. I take great care of those kiddos. That's my God-given right. So, Michelle, what we're doing is we're helping people to understand that there is a constitution, we have a Bill of Rights, and we have the right to say, no, we do not consent to these medical treatments that are really not for our good. And in fact, we prove harmful in many cases. In America, we should have the right to choose. And so we don't want anyone coming to our front door telling us we've got to go to isolation because we've got a sniffle. This is nefarious, this whole thing. So Sheriff Mack is a constitutional sheriff, and we're going to Dr. Bitar's event this weekend. Sheriff Mack's going to be there. We have reached a lot of military, our armed guards, the police, the sheriffs. We're trying to educate them on the Constitution so that they need to realize they're not an arm of the state to force us into these nefarious nets that they have laid for us. Rather, their job and their duty is to the Constitution and to protect and defend the people's freedoms and liberties. So if we can do that, if we can re-educate the people that are here to serve and to protect, and we understand the law and we band together, we come to the table with 5 million followers. Michelle, you've got millions of followers. Judy, she's gone viral all around the world. So we're attempting to lock the grid like they have, but lock it on good. So this really is light and darkness coming together. And we know the truth will win. And that's what we have on the table. And that's why they're censoring us. That's why they're censoring Judy and the videos. They keep taking them down. They go viral. And they're censoring us on every single platform. Judy, you don't know this, but they just removed our full-length interview we did, and it was still a private video. I released the part 1 and part 2, which are beautiful. We cut it and put it out there. They didn't touch that. They got the full-length interview, and then another little snip we shared of you that was private still. And they also removed part 2 of our roundtable we did with Bobby Kennedy, Andy Wakefield, Del Bigtree, Dr. Sherry Timpenny. They removed that just yesterday or the day before, within days. So they're in the middle of purging the truth about vaccines and patriots and all of that from their platforms.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It is a purge. And, one thing that's unique about the kinds of discussions we're having is that we actually do care about our constitutional rights, right? So rarely do you hear that in public discussions about this pandemic. It's an afterthought, if it's a thought at all, to talk about that, whether it's our First Amendment rights, our rights of parental sovereignty, to exercise authority over our families and our own children. And Kent, I want to go to the First Amendment issue because this is really global. Yesterday, I had on this extraordinary Irish journalist, and I don't know if you've all are familiar with her work, but she has done a lot on challenging HPV, Gemma O'Doherty. And she's suing over the lockdown laws there, very extreme laws, as well as fighting back against defamation. There are many of these Irish publications that have falsely accused her of harming public health, of being a conspiracy theorist, yada, yada, yada. And Ken, I read somewhere, I don't think we've talked about this, that you were banned from Australia. Is that right?
I am banned from the entire continent of Australia.
Wow,
yes.
You've definitely trumped me because I was banned in Boston and Maine, but like you were banned from a whole country. Can you tell people more about that?
Yeah, so you may know about the film Vax that was put together by Polly Tommy and Andy Wakefield and Del Bigtree. And they did a tour through Australia, and they were hassled by the government. And when they were getting ready to leave, they were detained by immigration for about an hour. They took all of their materials, photographed them. And at the end, the immigration agent said to Polly Tommy, if we'd known what you were going to talk about, we never would have let you in the country. Now, I had a relationship with Polly Tommy because I had written for her Autism File magazine. I called her up after I heard the story, I interviewed her, got the story, and that little bit just kind of stayed in my mind. If we knew what you were going to talk about, we wouldn't have let you into the country. So I thought, I'm going to apply for a visa to Australia as a speaker. And then in the pages of Bolin Report, where I write, Bolen report, okay, I published a very public letter to the Prime Minister in which I declared my intention to do a dangerous science speaking tour of Australia, in which I was going to speak about vaccines. And I said specifically, I thought, given my worldwide importance as the world's #1 anti-vaxxer, it would be good if he met me at the airport. But if he couldn't meet me at the airport, I was happy to take an Uber to his private residence. And I really didn't want him making a big fuss over me. But if he wanted to give me an award for my work, I would accept Officer of the Order of Australia. And, I didn't think anything was going to come of it from, me writing on Bolin Report. And, a day or two later, somebody calls me up and says, Kent, you're worldwide news. And I find out that I was denounced in the Australian Parliament by their immigration minister. who said, we're not going to allow this dangerous American to come to our country. And I even sent the prime minister a copy of my book, Inoculated, just for him to look for if there were any errors of fact I'd made. And so, what I think is important is that we be provocative and we be brave at this time. So I just put it in their face. And so, after they banned me and, I filed my appeals and everything and they didn't do it. The next article, I called for a naval blockade of Australia until they restored democracy. And I just kept giving it to them. I said that if the prime minister and his wife, who own 6 million shares of pharma company stock, if they voluntarily left power, I gave them a list of places they could go, like the Maldives Islands. I actually gave them a list of like the top 10 restaurants because, I'm sure the prime minister's wife wants to dine out. She doesn't want to cook every night.
Right.
So I just decided you can't be scared of these people and that's why I embrace the anti-vaxxer label, because, why should we let our enemies control the battlefield? So I'm going to accept that label. I'll defend it. And, if they do the research and show me something safe, I'll change my mind. But if they're just going to call me nasty names and ban me from entire continents, I ain't going to stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen. More power to you, Ken. So Judy, there was so much hope when President Trump tweeted that tweet where he talked about plagues.
Right.
And, there had been some indication that maybe perhaps President Trump had watched some of Plandemic or was aware of your work. And so this gave so many of us hope. And then last week, he seemed to be sending mixed signals about where he stood on this new Operation Warp Speed program that is being spearheaded by the military to foist 300 million doses of a COVID vaccine on the American public. We haven't had a chance to talk about this, so I wanted to get your feedback first on that.
Yeah, well, I was really stunned when I saw that he was even embracing in any way this proposal. But I did see a few days later that he was against all mandatory vaccines.
Yeah, he did clarify.
And then I saw this morning that he said if governors don't let people go back to church this weekend, he would overrule them. So these messages may seem mixed, but he seems to be doing exactly what he promised the Americans he would do, and that is sticking to the Constitution, our constitutional rights to peaceably assemble, to go to church, to not be forced to taking unsafe, untested vaccines. So it's been a roller coaster.
Yeah, it is. Strap in, right?
Right. And so we're on Autism One live summit right now. We're virtual in a panel with all the injuries and type 1 diabetes from vaccines. And I actually show some of the data that I did in vaccine court. So I hope and pray every day that he continues to see this, and I'm just grateful to people like you to continue to post it, because after Charlene, they took down my slides from The Truth About Cancer that I posted first last October 12th or 13th, that I gave that talk there in Anaheim, the live Truth About Cancer. They just took it off our website this week. So they took my own private talks off plaguethebook.com. And so we've been censored at a great, and I have almost nothing going through any emails. That's why, just really tough as far as the censorship. But I'll be back with Mickey Willis tomorrow, and we got a little surprise of part 2 and 3 coming soon. So we won't give up. We're like Kent. We're never going to give up. And
never give
let
up.
me jump in here real quick, Judy, and I've talked to Mickey too. We want to help release that part. It's pretty exciting what's happening,
Right.
But this is really shocking. Our website has been attacked too. There's been a big attack on, and we're working behind the scenes on that to secure the website and the information. Can you make it more clear about what exactly happened? You just said they got on your website. Now, we've been censored on Facebook. We've been censored on Instagram. They're hiding our hashtag, The Truth About Vaccines, on Instagram. You can't find it. They're shadow banning our hashtags here on Twitter and on Facebook. I heard Bobby, you talking to Bobby earlier, Michelle, he said he can't run ads. We can't either. We cannot run ads. And they told us that they would cut our traffic, and they're purging these videos. But you just said they got onto your website, and that's a whole different thing. And that's what we're going through right now. We're trying to figure out what's going on. But for them to remove content, and these people try to get inside of my website by going through the admin console. Thankfully, my director of tech, saw it, the alarm went off, and he's protecting us. What happened there, Judy? How did they do that?
All I know is our web mistress, Cheryl, who keeps it up. We use a platform. I'm not exactly sure which platform she uses. It could still be a GoDaddy platform, but they said basically these things violated. There were several. It wasn't just that Truth About Cancer talk. Some of the others that have been supporting the truth that the Washington Post or the New York Times, they can't refute. And so we're coming up, just as you did, to defend, here's exactly the truth, and yes, what we said are right. So these are the talks and the papers and the publications we're showing about the flu shots driving these pandemics and things like that. And so they're just pulling down. And so they said, I got an email notice that said it's violated whatever the platform is, and they took it down.
And I'd like to add another story that I've heard, which is that people who have downloaded the pandemic video onto their own Google players, if they've shared it with somebody, Google is actually going into their player and removing it from their own personal player. So this is a level of unprecedented censorship. And Michelle, I'm so happy that you are standing up with us, because you are a warrior. You've been a warrior for years. And when you first told me that you were willing to look at my book, I was over the moon about it. So thank you.
Well, there's strength in numbers. And I think that's why they're trying to squelch us so much, is they don't want people making these connections. And so they engender fear, right? Oh, well, you don't want to associate with that person. You don't want to, use a hashtag or tag this person, because then they'll smear us by guilt by association, altogether, and push us all off. I want to mention last spring, when the WHO and all of these global health organizations and Bill Gates were foisting this whole vaccine hesitancy campaign. This is what I wrote in a column that I did last spring. Under pressure from Congressman Adam Schiff, and we were talking about him with Robert, Amazon pulled the documentaries Vaxxed, Man-Made Epidemic, and Shoot 'em Up, The Truth About Vaccines from its Prime Video streaming service. Google-owned YouTube moved to demonetize anti-vaccine channels, tweak algorithms, and this is where it comes in, right? These algorithms that are reaching into your websites, reaching into your laptop, tweaked algorithms to suppress vaccine, quote unquote, conspiracy videos and combat vaccine hesitancy. Pinterest blocked users from using the search terms vaccine, vaccination, and anti-vax. And by the way, I spoke to a former whistleblower from Pinterest who was working for the company as they were introducing those algorithms. So people who were skeptical or critical or anti-vax were the canary in the coal mine for all of the larger Silicon Valley censorship that we're seeing. And this was last spring. Facebook planned to downgrade vaccine skeptics' content on news feeds, recommended user groups, and ads. This has been in the works for a long, long time. And to talk about the idea that there has been a plan and that it's being put into place, the very end of the first installment of Plandemic, where you see that chilling little soundbite of Anthony Fauci telegraphing what's coming down the line. And yet we're just, conspiracy theorists spouting false information. It's just, I just have to commend all you for, continuing to carry the torch on all this. We have a couple minutes left, so I want to go back around the opposite way and then end up with Judy last. Charlene, tell us more about this event that you're having and how, especially, you talked about military and police officers, how people can reach you to connect with you and keep up with all of the stuff you're doing.
Well, everything that we're doing, and thank you for the opportunity, we are on thetruthaboutcancer.com, and we have a free newsletter. I encourage everyone to sign up for that because they're purging us everywhere. And you mentioned Pinterest. They kicked us off a few years ago because we tell the truth about vaccines. They literally removed our page. And on Facebook, we have a bigger page, The Truth About Cancer, a verified page, Cancer Truth. But we have the Truth About Vaccines docuseries. And when you search for that, word for word, letter for letter, you will find first the WHO, then CDC and Bill Gates and UNICEF and all these things, these pages that have nothing to do with, but they show themselves to be vaccine pushers. So this is what we're up against. So this weekend, it's our good friend, Dr. Rashid Buttar. He's having an event in North Carolina. So if you go to our website, we'll have stuff about that. I can't remember. It's look at Rashid Buttar. He's got some websites. We do too on all of our social media, but we are getting together. There's somebody, I'll tell you offline, Michelle, who might be there and you'll be pretty excited. We're working on some things, but yeah, you too, Judy. I'll tell you too. For sure.
I'll be there.
I'm not sure. It's pretty exciting. I'm really hoping this person shows up, but they're censoring us, and there's some inside information I could give you offline, but it's going to be big. We're going to stream it. People are going to be watching. We've had people driving from across the country to be there because they're trying to shut it down because they don't want to open up America again. They don't want us to get together. And so we're just making this line, and we want to show people that you can get together. The human experience, hugging and loving one another, is so critical. It's critical, and we need to get back to it. And our voice together, as you said, Michelle, is very strong.
I so agree with you about this. And having a 19-year-old and 16-year-old who for the past several months have just been, held hostage, and not just literally, but just the fear from reading everything in social media and what they see on TikTok and all. I mean, it is a mental and emotional and psychological jail that a generation of children have been relegated to. And it's so alarming to think about what their school environment is going to look like. The choice they have now is between being chained to a laptop if they don't have parents who are homeschooling them, where they're getting data mined and brainwashed, or going to a school situation where it's going to look like Apocalypse Now every day. It's just we need to restore some sanity. So I so appreciate your organizing efforts, Charlene, and to organize constitutionally as our right to peaceably assemble.
Yes.
Kent, I'm going to put up bolinreport.com, and there it is. And let us know what you're blogging about lately.
Yeah, so I've been blogging about Judy and the truth about the charges against her. So she's been keeping me busy, but I think that we are terrifying the mainstream media and Big Pharma. And Dr. Judy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Charlene, and I are willing to accept unconditional surrender from Big Pharma. And as long as they hand over, we know they're scared. So let us remove the fear from Big Pharma. We will accept your unconditional surrender. Hand us over all of your files. Let us know who you're paying off in the media. Let us know who you're paying off in the journals. And, we can't promise what will happen to you. But, any good hero offers the villains a chance to surrender before the final assault. So we are offering that unconditional surrender to Big Pharma. We suggest it.
I love it. The writing's on the wall. The gauntlet has been thrown down by General Kent Heckenlively. I love
That's
it.
right.
Judy, I just continue to watch you fighting out there every single day. So this is very exciting. You've just let people know that future installments are coming out soon. So I've gotten a couple of questions from people. They've been trying to log on to plandemicmovie.com. And some people are having problems. It could be whatever gremlin has been implanted there. But as far as people can still access part one, and you've got new ones coming up. Yes?
Yeah, it's tough to find right now, but Mickey's trying to get it back up every time. So yes, a lot of corrupted versions have gone up, but we're still trying to keep it up there. As I mentioned, at freedomsphoenix.com. I was on Ernie Hancock's show at 8 o'clock this morning, and so he's got it up there again, and he'll promise to keep pulling it up. He keeps. I think it's on the hard drive on the page with me. So and I'm also going to be at the Advanced Medicine Conference. I think I'm speaking at 2:30 tomorrow, but I'll be virtual.
Yay.
But I have lots of prayers there for you. I have to write that talk this afternoon. We've got Autism One virtual summit ongoing right now. So I think at 6 o'clock in the morning, I'll be talking about Gardasil injuries. It could be a touch later, but yeah, I got this 6 this morning and the 6. No, tomorrow or Sunday morning, it's tough, but hey, we'll keep getting up and we'll keep giving the talks every single day. I was on the SGT report last week. I was on. I did Brian Rose, London Real TV again last week. Pretty much this morning we were on the Hawk in Washington D.C. Kent and I were on the show. So we just keep getting it out there every way we can, getting the message out. And again, we won't stop getting out that this pandemic is a plague of corruption. And Kent has graciously offered. I'm not as gracious about offering them a surrender. And
Or it is unconditional, Judy.
Unconditional.
Yeah, that's unconditional
There's no
surrender.
condition.
Okay.
I love
They
it.
have to submit to our justice.
Judy, Charlene, and Ken, it was just a joy to speak with you all, an honor to be marching alongside you. Keep doing what you're doing. God bless, and stay safe. Although I never, what does that mean? Because safe means being locked up in your home and being quiet, right? Be disruptive. Continue to be that.
No matter where we are, we're in the hands of God, and He has got our backs. And so from the eye of the storm, which right now we are going to North Carolina, and we're going to go out into the world, and we are safe.
Amen. I love it. Take care, all of you.
St. Michael's medal, God's toughest angel. So I'm asking God, give me your best angel.
The best protection and immunity right there. Right, Ken?
And
there you go.
Next Saturday, May 30th, I'll be at the main stage in Ramona, California with Graham Leisure and we'll be out there in force. Last Saturday, we were at a pool party of more than 100 people, not a single mask, a lot of fun, a lot of discussions about potluck, great cooking. So we're out there and we're peaceably assembling, and civil disobedience is what we're about. We'll be at our yacht club, PBYC, for pbyc.org in about an hour. If anybody wants to come buy drinks here in Ventura.
Oh, nice.
Up there on Spinnaker Drive. You know where to find us. PBYC is the safest place to be.
And tomorrow at 12 noon at the California State Capitol, there is a demonstration to open California. So those of us who live in California, who were born in California and don't want to leave for Texas or some other place, we're going to be defending our state, standing up.
Fantastic. I love it. Breathing free, fresh air.
Right.
All right.
Even in California.
Yeah, that's right. Take care, all of you.
Take care, Michelle.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. See you tomorrow.